Chapter 1. The Pines That Whisper. A charming cottage was nestled among tall trees that appeared to reach the sky, deep within the old forests. It was an unspoiled area, a haven for people looking for peace and quiet and a link to the natural world. However, underneath the serene exterior of the forest, there was a terrifying secret that was only revealed to individuals who had approached the cabin too closely after dusk. Sarah was a 20-something girl who had always been drawn to the peace and quiet of the woodland. She had heard stories about the cabin's eerie past, of a spectral being that prowled the woods at night and left behind melancholic howls that reverberated through the foliage. Sarah was not intimidated by the tales and made the decision to spend a weekend away from the bustle of the city in the cabin. She was mesmerized by the wood's splendor when she arrived and made herself at home. There were mottled shadows on the woodland floor as sunlight streamed through the pine trees. She appeared to be welcomed by the rustling leaves and the sweet songs of the birds. Sarah built a pleasant fire in the cabin's fireplace as dusk approached, and its warmth helped to ward off the approaching darkness. Savoring the quiet and the feeling of being at one with nature, she cooked a modest supper. However, as the night grew longer, a chill descended upon the cottage and the outside wind began to sound melancholy. While sitting by the fire, Sarah started to hear faint murmurs that seemed to be coming from the cabin's walls. She initially wrote them off as figments of her imagination, delusions brought on by the noises of the forest. Still, the murmurs continued, becoming clearer and louder. It seemed as though a solid yet invisible presence had entered the cabin. With her pulse pounding, Sarah looked about the dimly lighted room, her eyes darting from one corner to the other. Then a ghostly figure with long, flowing hair and a white garment that billowed as though caught in a never-ending breeze materialized out of the shadows. Her eyes stared at Sarah, empty and full of grief. As she approached, the spectral form moved with a hauntingly beautiful elegance. When Sarah understood she was facing the fabled ghost of the woods, a soul caught between two worlds and either seeking comfort or something darker, fear overcame her. Sarah started to hear the ghost talking more clearly, and even though she couldn't understand what it was saying, it still gave her a chill. Sarah left the cottage in a panic, leaving the comforting embrace of the fire behind. With branches scratching at her and eerie murmurs following her like a persistent shadow, she staggered into the pitch-black forest. The ghost was getting closer to her, and she could feel its pain and desire pressing down on her. Sarah was breathing heavily, gasping for air as she fled farther into the forest in an attempt to escape the ghost's unrelenting chase. She had no idea that the terrifying mysteries of the woods and the secrets of the haunted cottage would soon come to light, in ways she could never have predicted. Sarah's terrible meeting with the ghostly figure in the cabin and her desperate escape into the harsh, dark woods where she was followed by ominous whispers and an invisible enemy marked the end of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. The Trail of Shadows. Sarah struggled to put some distance between herself and the spectral apparition that had haunted the cabin as she staggered through the dark forest's deep undergrowth, breathing in short gasps. The branches of the trees twisted and reached out like skeleton fingers, as if they were working together with the evil force to shut in on her. She was surrounded by the voices that had followed her from the lodge, echoing across the forest. The melancholy voice of the ghost appeared to be both everywhere and nowhere at once, giving Sarah a sense of smothering dread. She moved deeper into the forest, driven solely by the faint moonlight that peeked through the tree canopy above, as her movements were driven by desperation. Despite her lack of direction, she continued ahead due to her need for survival. Sarah came onto an old, overgrown track as she struggled into the darkness. It was almost visible behind layers of fallen leaves and tangled vines. She couldn't quite place it, but it felt like the forest was guiding her in some direction. Sarah had little choice but to follow the route in the hopes that it would offer protection from the ghost's impending appearance and the incessant whispering. The longer she went, the more the woods appeared to change, the air getting colder, the shadows getting deeper. The path brought her to a clearing illuminated by the unsettling lunar light. An old, gnarled tree with grotesquely twisted and distorted limbs stood in the heart of it all. The murmurs became louder, around her like a wicked storm. The earth beneath Sarah's feet appeared to give way abruptly, and she fell into a secret hole disguised by leaves and moss. She fell with a thump, immobilized as pain surged through her ankle. Sarah tried to see what had caused her fall, feeling exposed and panicked. She was horrified to see bony fingers protruding from the hole and skeleton hands grabbing at the ground. Sarah became aware that she had wandered into an abandoned graveyard and that something had disturbed it when the soil appeared to come alive. Ghostly creatures emerged from the pit's darkness, a legion of tortured souls. As they circled Sarah, their empty eyes staring at her with a hunger that chilled her to the bone, their melancholy wails filled the area. Sarah felt her pulse race upon realizing that she was encircled by the restless ghosts of the past and that she was imprisoned. She had come to this horrible place because of the whispers of the ghostly figure she had seen in the cabin, and now she was in the hands of the furious spirits out for revenge. Sarah desperately looked for a route out of the abyss in an attempt to save herself. She was aware that her destiny would be sealed and she would suffer forever with the afflicted spirits if she was unable to free herself from their grasp. Sarah's discovery of the old burial ground and her imprisonment in the pit, surrounded by resentful ghosts, marked the conclusion of Chapter 2. Sarah's fight for survival had taken a terrifying turn as it became clear that the evil power that had been after her had dark ties to the haunted past of the woodland. Chapter 3. Revealed Agreement. Sarah felt her heart accelerate as she realized she was stuck in the pit and that the resentful ghosts rising from the old burial place encircled her. Their melancholy wails filled the area like a melancholic chorus, and their empty eyes stared deep into hers. Sarah felt her survival instincts come into play in the middle of her terror. She was aware that she needed to find a means to get out of the hole and away from the troublesome spirits. Even though her ankle hurt, she couldn't afford to remain immobile. Sarah mustered her strength and looked into the abyss for a way out. She was relieved to see a small opening in the wall of the hole, partially obscured by dense undergrowth and sprawling vines. It seemed to be her only opportunity. Sarah started to climb with a renewed sense of will, utilizing the vines and roots as temporary handholds. She was pushed forward by her urgent need to survive even as the phantom beings in the pit reached out to her, their ethereal hands caressing her skin with a cold touch. Sarah emerged from the pit, coated in dirt and leaves and gasping for air after what seemed like an age. She had just avoided falling into the resentful spirit's paws below. Her ordeal was far from ended, though. Sarah became aware that the murmurs in the forest were becoming louder and more intense as she gathered her breath. She felt as though the evil force pursuing her had grown stronger, pulling her more into the eerie forest. Following the overgrown path, Sarah staggered through the shadowy woodland, terrified by the phantom creatures she had left behind. Even though her ankle hurt, she was unable to stop. She needed to learn the truth about the wood's haunting and the evil power that appeared intent on claiming her. The route took her to an old, moss-covered stone circle, which was a strange and uncomfortable location that looked to be pulsating with an unearthly force. An altar made of crumbling stone with fading etchings and inscriptions stood in the midst of the circle. With a thumping heart, Sarah walked up to the altar. At that moment, the spectral woman she had seen in the cabin suddenly appeared in front of her, her somber eyes staring at Sarah with an eerie intensity. With a phantom hand that was obviously meant for the altar, the ethereal figure reached out. It desired for Sarah to comprehend, to reveal the mysteries of the woodland and the evil energy that confined her here. Sarah reached out to touch the altar with a shaky hand, and a flood of memories shot through her head. She had glimpses of the past, a sinister ceremony carried out in this precise circle, a deal struck with a demonic force, the anguished spirits of those who had been offered a sacrifice. Sarah heard the spectral apparition convey the truth to her. Long ago, a desperate agreement struck by individuals who desired power above everything else resulted in the curse that still exists today in the forest. The evil force that had been called upon was still ravenous for human flesh, and it was out to make Sarah its next meal. Sarah came to the realization that breaking the deal was the only way to end the curse and get away from the evil entity. But to do so would mean making a personal sacrifice, a decision that would put her bravery and resolve to the ultimate test. Sarah learned the truth about the wood's haunting and the evil thing pursuing her at the end of Chapter 3. She would have to make a terrifying decision that would decide both her fate and the fate of the haunting woodland in order to release the curse. Chapter 4. The Offering. Sarah found herself in the center of the old stone circle, with a terrifying discovery weighing heavily on her and a ghostly apparition standing in front of her. A desperate alliance had cursed the woodland, and the evil being that had been called forth was still ravenous for human flesh, Sarah being its next meal. The spectral apparition spoke to Sarah in a chilling whisper as she took in the sobering facts. It begged her to lift the curse, to renounce the sinister agreement that had tethered her to this evil spirit and captivated the forests. But to do so would mean making a sacrifice, a decision that would decide her destiny. The apparition reached out to Sarah with a phantom hand that held an old knife with mysterious markings engraved on its blade. It served as a terrifying reminder of the ceremony that had cursed the woodland and the tool used by the evil force to take its victims. Accepting the dagger with a sad heart and a sense of resignation, Sarah knew what had to be done. She needed to carry out a ceremony that would permanently cut off the evil force's link to the woodland and put an end to the haunting. However, the ceremony required a blood sacrifice, which was an unavoidable cost. Sarah was led through the process by the spectral apparition, whose ethereal presence served as a continual reminder of the significance of her choice. There was an unearthly spirit in the forest as she performed the proper offerings and murmured the incantations. The stones radiated an unsettling light, and the trees murmured. Sarah realized that the time for the sacrifice had come as the ceremony was about to reach its peak. She was forced to decide between giving up her own blood to remove the curse and giving in to the evil entity's appetite. Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she made her choice. She pushed the old dagger to her palm with quivering hands, drawing her own blood. Even though the agony was sudden and intense, she remained strong. She spilled her blood upon the altar, blending it with the curse's emblems. A loud roar reverberated across the woodland as soon as the first blood drops made contact with the stone. Devoid of its link to the curse, the evil force let loose its wrath. The whole earth shook, and the spectral beings that had followed Sarah throughout her journey let forth agonized screams. But Sarah remained steadfast. She finished the rite with a last incantation, ensuring the evil entity's demise. As the spell was lifted and the evil entity was permanently exiled, the forest appeared to sigh with relief. The spirit that had led Sarah grinned and had tears in its eyes as the evil force vanished from sight. It would no longer haunt the woods or harass the living, having at last achieved relief. Tired and bruised, Sarah fell to the floor, her eyes watering. The woodland was now serene as the moon poured its soft light over it from its lofty position in the sky. The apparitions had stopped whispering, and the haunting was over. Sarah realized as she lay there that her offering had spared not just the haunting woods and everyone who may have been a victim of the evil energy, but also herself. The old woodland was once again free, the evil defeated, with Sarah's valiant offering, the curse being broken, and the evil force being driven from the haunting woods. Chapter 4 came to a close. With her terrifying voyage into the depths of darkness permanently marked, Sarah had triumphed over the haunting.